As you can probably tell, I am not from Sweden. I am from Skåne. Okay, no, I am from India. I moved to Sweden 5 years ago. Some of my friends ask me why. My Italian friends ask me why. As it happens with many life-altering decisions, this also was under the inspiration of alcohol. It was one of my good drunk decisions. Thankfully, it was also my last because I could not afford alcohol ever since I moved to Sweden. People sometimes ask me what I was expecting before I moved to Sweden. In fact, I googled about it. That's what my kind does. I read an interesting article. It said that I can expect lovely nature, beautiful lakes, and a rich economy. Later, it turns out the article was about Switzerland and not Sweden. Just kidding. Am I? Shortly after moving here, I tried to do something that only very few foreigners have tried to do. I tried to integrate in the culture. In the initial days, I went to the bookstore to see what the Swedish people care about. And it was just stacked with 50 Shades of Grey. You see, I was naive back then and I did not know what the book was about. This was sometime in November and I thought 50 Shades of Grey. This must be a book about Swedish weather. But then I saw the cover photo and I saw a hot couple dressed in tight black clothes. And then I thought, 50 Shades of Grey. Now I get it. This must be a book about Swedish fashion. In fact, modern Sweden is so diverse that 50 Shades of Grey might as well be a book about Swedish demographics. When I finally read it, boy, I was surprised. I mean, pleasantly surprised. Then I tried to do something very few people have succeeded in. I tried to rent an apartment. By now, I have lived in 10 different apartments in 5 different communes. So if you define residence by where I have spent my most time, I would be a resident of Swedish housing queue. To people who say Sweden lacks a sense of humor, I would say that's not true. Take a look at the housing situation. That's a joke. In Sweden, we have a queue for everything. Housing, schooling, daycare, dog daycare, surgeries, whatnot. In fact, if being in queue was an Olympic sport, Norway and Denmark would be fighting hard to win the top spot and Sweden would come in and say, guys, you want the gold? You want the gold? Please stand in the queue. Participants who would like to win the gold, please join the queue. Then I tried to do something that a very small percentage of humans have ever tried to do. I tried to learn Swedish. I told my mom that I was trying to learn Swedish and that 10 million people speak Swedish. And she was like, wow, 10 million people. So what do they speak in the other cities? The best part about learning Swedish is that it doesn't have a lot of complicated words. It uses more descriptive words. Like when you want to say hospital. A hospital is just a house of the sick. A hippopotamus is just a river horse. A vacuum cleaner is just a dust sucker. A straw is a suck pipe. Pulp is just fruit meat. Gums are just tooth meat. And my favorite, a turtle is just a frog with a shield. As I studied more Swedish, I was looking at Swedish phrases like clear as a sausage broth, bang on the beetroot, sail in on a shrimp sandwich. It felt like there is more variety of food in the Swedish phrases than in the Swedish supermarket. Some people say that Sweden lacks social life. And to those I say, sure, social life might suck, but have you seen the social welfare? Social life gives you friends and all. But what are the odds your friend pays for your child's healthcare and education? And then, oh man, I learnt about parental leave. My first reaction was, wait, I am from India. If there is one thing you should know about us, it is that we don't need incentives to produce more of us. India and Sweden are two very different countries. In both countries, there are both rich and the poor. But the people have many common experiences. Just that when the rich people do it, they have a different name for it. For example, some of the unfortunately poor people literally live under the rocks. Back home, it's called poverty. Here, it's called camping. Many children have to start working as early teenagers. In India, it's called child labor. In Sweden, it's called a summer job. At 15 years of age, one of my Swedish friends was a sailing instructor. Another was a running coach. At 15, in India, I was just a disappointment. When you go weeks or months without a job, in India it's called unemployment. Here it's just called a vacation. When the government spends money on things that benefit a small set of people at the cost of taxes to many people, back home it's called corruption, and here it's called social welfare. In Sweden, most often every adult in a home works. It's called equal employment. Back home it's called can't pay the bills in one income. Sometimes some people walk 15 kilometers in a day carrying just 1 or 2 days worth of water. Back home it's called water shortage. Here it's called hiking. In both countries, people form partnerships that help long-term socio-economic prosperity. In Sweden, it's called trade deals. Back home, we call it arranged marriage. There are some differences though. In India, we don't get enough calories to lead a healthy life. In Sweden, we don't burn enough calories to lead a healthy life. Indian politicians disappoint most of the Indian public. Swedish politicians disappoint most of the Swedish public. India ranks high in census. Sweden ranks high in consensus. India's immigration problem is that people leave the country. Sweden's immigration problem is people come into the country. And I am an example of both of your problems. In southern India, we complain about the weather being too hot. In Sweden, we complain about the weather being hot, cold, windy, cloudy, dry, rainy, and sometimes on the same day. In India, we produce a lot of food, but don't eat much of it. In Sweden, we eat a lot of food, but don't produce much of it. Religion plays an important role in both cultures. In India, that would be Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, Sikhism, Jainism, Buddhism, etc. In Sweden, that would be veganism. It's true, veganism is a religion. If you think about it, people are dogmatic, there are as many believers and disbelievers, and there is a visible tension between them. Believers are sometimes annoying, and just like any religion, it might have a decent underlying message. And as always, no amount of logic is going to change people's mind. Indian culture is built on relationships. With your neighbors, you have a friendly one, and with your boss, you have a dysfunctional one. Swedish culture is also built on relationships. With your boss, you have a friendly one. With your neighbors, you have a dysfunctional one. You see, in India, you can make eye contact with strangers, but you can't be naked around them. In Stockholm, it's the opposite. The worst thing is when you put them together, like in a gym dressing room. You have naked strangers all around you, and you can't make eye contact. I mean, where do you look? After the many experiences, people ask me, where does my heart belong? I can only say that I'm extremely grateful that I have a stan in Hindustan and a home in Stockholm.